Tonight I'm out in the garage working on the Factory 5 Cobra. So I have a list, and the first thing on the list is to fix the door handle. Now, there's a great quote by Colin Chapman. He said, any car that holds together for a whole race was built too heavy. Well, this car obviously wasn't built too heavy in the door handle area because the door handle did not hold together for a whole race. And if you watched my video from Cayuga at the end of the season, back in the fall, this door handle let me down and I had to climb out over the car. So it's a fairly easy repair. That's something common to happen on these Factory 5s. And the way we're going to fix it is going to make it vastly stronger so that it will not break again. I've seen this done online, but I haven't seen a video of it before. So thank you to everyone that did this before me and figured it out that I'm following. Follow along. We're going to start by taking the door latch out of the car. That just takes a couple of screws. So the door handle on this car is very simple. It's just on the inside. There's no outside door handle. You pull this little knob ahead and that turns a pivot and pulls a pin and unlatches it. But as you can see, it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So first we take this cover off with two little tiny screws that are very easy to lose. Keep those in my hand. This would be a great time to have a magnetic parts tray handy to put these in so I don't lose them. But they're all full of, but all of my trays are full of golf cart parts right now. Put these, that's not even going to come off. So put those there where they'll be safe. And this won't come all the way off because of the way the door is latched. So you can't see what I'm doing with my finger, but I stick it in here and try and get the door latch to release. There we go. And now this will come off and we'll set that aside. So as you can see, this is not working right. It's all loose and it's come apart. 4 screws and we can take this right off of the car. And there's a spacer behind here, so we don't want to let that fall out and go under the car or something. Well, it looks like all the guts of this latch fell out and rolled underneath the car, so now I got to go look for those. This should be fun. So here I am at the bench. This is the piece that was underneath the car. I discovered that this is not magnetic, so I couldn't pick it up with a magnet and had to get a broom. And this is one of those times when I'm glad my floor is pretty clean. I swept it yesterday when the car wasn't in the garage, so it was really easy to find this. If I had screws and bolts and bits of metal and other junk on the floor, this would have been harder to find. So this goes in the back here, fits into that recess. Like that. And this square part is supposed to go into that square hole. You can see that's kind of out of shape there because the spring is holding it. And that's sort of, I don't know if it's a pressed fit or it's peened on or something. But it's obviously not staying there on its own. So, square hole is perfect size for a 5/16 carriage bolt. I'm going to grab my can of carriage bolts, see if we have a bolt that's the right size for this. I like working on these trays because parts don't roll away easily. So this is my can of random carriage bolts. So like this one here would be the right size. It's going to almost fit in there. So it's going to be kind of perfect when it gets squeezed in once I put a nut on there. But this one's not threaded all the way. I'd like one that is threaded. That I think is the perfect one. It's going to fit in. Yeah, that'll squeeze in when I put a nut on there. It's threaded all the way like I want. We can cut this. It's a little bit longer than we need, but that's going to work perfectly. So, okay, so I've got this held together temporarily with a pair of vice grips. It's not perfect because that's not all the way in. But it'll work for what I want to do, which is to fit this bolt in and try and figure out how deep I can go. This is obviously too far. It's going to stick out past that cover. So I need to trim this off, but I want to keep kind of as much bolt as possible. And if I can, I'd like to use one of these nylon nuts so this doesn't come off. If I can't fit that in there, I'll have to put some Loctite on it. So I've got the cover here, and the cover goes on like that. So my bolt is going to go through the hole. See, that's too long there. So if I use my calipers here, I can measure. It's not going to be perfectly accurate, but it'll be good enough for cutting a bolt to length. That's going to show me the depth of how far I can go into that hole. So that is a little less than an inch. So with the bolt I'm using, we put that under there. It's right there, almost right by that rusty part. It's almost perfectly marked for me, but I will mark this with a marker to be a little more accurate. We can put all these other bolts we're not using back in the can. So if I line that up like that, I can put a little mark with a marker. Right there. And then trim that off with a hacksaw will work good, or I'm going to use my little portable battery-powered bandsaw. So before I cut this bolt, I'm going to thread a nut on. And that way, if the threads get a little bit mangled when I turn that off, it'll roll the threads back and correct them a little bit. Yeah. Okay, so I got my bolt cut to the length that I need. Now, when it goes through this piece, once it's all installed, this is going to protrude through here, and I need something to hold this round piece on to this with the bolt. So a washer would work, but the washer's not going to sit down far enough. It's got to go down onto that ledge there. So now I'm going to use a step drill to drill the hole in this washer out just a little bit bigger. This would be the sketchy part of the video. So the trick here is to hold it in the vise tight enough that it doesn't spin, but not so tight that it crushes this and turns it into an oval. So now we can start assembling this, and it looks like I am going to have enough thread to get this nylon nut on there. That's great. That'll lock that down kind of better than anything else could have. So I'm fighting this spring a little bit to get it together. And if you're wondering why I didn't just use a bigger washer with a bigger hole, that would interfere with where this spring is. So we're dealing in small spaces, so we have to use small parts. And now that I've got this together, I realize I have a bit of an issue. This nut now is going to pass through that washer. It doesn't quite go, but it'll pull itself through. So what I'm going to have to do is actually put another washer on the top. And I think that's going to use up all of my thread length. And I'm not actually going to be able to use that nylon nut. So let's put it together with a regular nut and see if that works or not. And I'm going to be very gentle with all of this stuff because I do not want to break it. This metal here may be a little delicate as far as when it's going to suddenly snap on me. So be very careful not to force anything. I don't want to force this in here. I want this all to go together nice and smoothly. See that nut's pulling it all together very nice and gently. If that washer is seated, which I think it has, this should all just kind of pop together when I tighten this nut down. Yep, that's pulling that in there very nicely. It's just kind of putting it all back together. Now, what was happening before is because this was all apart, when you pulled this lever, instead of it moving this pin to unlatch the door, it just moved down here. So now it can't do that. So look at that. Our door latch is going to work perfectly. So I don't have enough thread to use the nylon nut, unfortunately, because that's a little bit deeper than this nut. So I'm going to pull this nut off. I'm going to fix where that spring is so it's not underneath that washer because I just don't like the way it's sitting. And I'm going to put some Loctite on this and put it back together. Okay, that's snugged up, Loctited. Everything's working. The last thing I'm going to do while this is all apart is spray a little bit of lubricant in there because it's easy to get to right now. And if you're concerned about that the head of this carriage bolt sticks out past the back of the latch and interferes with the inside of the door, remember this spacer that came off when we took it apart? This one goes on like that, and that gives us that clearance that we need, so that is not going to interfere. I don't understand why they didn't make it like this from the factory. This makes so much more sense. So all we have to do is put the 4 screws in to put this back on the car, put the cover back on, and we should be fine. Okay, moment of truth. I'm going to check that this works before I put the cover on. It closes, and look at that, it opens perfectly. Put the cover back on, and we're done. Perfect. And what's even better is I'm already crossing things off of the list. Door latch. Crossed off. So, other things on the list that I'm going to address this year. Brake pedal. Something's going on that it's maintaining brake pressure when you're not pushing on the pedal. So, either it's a bind in the pedal assembly underneath the dash, which is super hard to work on because you have to go in there head first, or it's maybe in the master cylinder that's somehow holding pressure, or even the booster when it's under vacuum. There's a push rod in there that's adjustable. I got to look at that. I'd like to make adjustable pedals for this car so that I can bring them a little bit closer to me. I don't have super long legs, and the way this car is set up right now, I like where the seat is, I like where the steering wheel is, but I gotta like push my toe all the way down to get wide open throttle, and the same on the clutch. So I'd like to figure out a way to make those pedals a little bit adjustable. I have a new intake. You might have seen the other video I have where I was cleaning that up and getting it ready to go on the car. I have a new fuel pump for the car. I think this one's failing because you have to run the fuel pump for a really long time after you shut the car off to get it to get fuel up to the engine. And I've actually bought a sway bar. It's for a Miata, which is roughly the same size and weight as this car. This car has no front sway bar at all. So I'm going to install that. So if you like seeing work get done on this Cobra and you'd like to see any of the stuff on this list, hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss those. And if you enjoyed seeing this, hit that like and show all your friends who have a Factory 5 and have a door latch problem like I do. We'll see you next time here in the garage.